As you guys know, anytime I say something over and over again, I realize it's probably better if I just shoot a video on it so that at least it has a wider audience and you can learn from it. I shot a video probably about 1.5 years ago called Brows, Balloons, and Bags, and I was talking about specifically how I view the aging process of the eye area. So if you're on YouTube or any other video source, you can type in, I think, brows, balloons, bags, shorelines, or something like that, and you'll see what I think about it. I'm not going to repeat the whole video, but the reason I'm going to introduce this concept is I'm trying to blend in two ideas, which is the concept behind the brow being a balloon, and also how safe is Botox being placed before the balloon is elevated or inflated. So I look at the brow in aging as three principal configurations. Configuration 1 is inflated and full. Configuration 2 is empty and high. Configuration 3 is empty and low. So most people, when we get older, it starts to become empty and low. And let me explain it from the context of the balloon theory again. And it's not theory, really. If you start to go back and look at your old photographs, you'll see that the brow was not necessarily more elevated, even though you may go like this, hey, it looks better, doc, but it was fuller. So this is actually a brow in youth, which is full. And as it gets older, it starts to deflate, and as it deflates, it looks like it's hanging. So then what do? We try to lift it up. But the problem is all we really need to do is blow it back up. And that's what a fat transfer does, is it blows it back up. So that's a short reiteration of the old idea. The concept that I want to impart to you is how I manage Botox in people that are aging when they have a low, a low empty brow. Okay, a low empty brow is not as good as a high empty brow. Now I'm not talking about some really big high brow lift, but a little elevation. But the ideal is a full brow. So what am I talking about? When I work with people before they get rejuvenated with fat transfer, I tend to focus on elevation of brow areas, like here and here, to give them that chemical brow lift. Because I agree, this a little bit does look better than when it's low. But once I've inflated the balloon, let me pick it up from the floor. Once I've blown up the balloon and it's full, it doesn't matter where the position is. So it doesn't matter if it's higher or lower. And the goal is to say that the balloon full is the ideal. The second ideal is a little elevation, not the stark brow lift look, but just a little elevation when the brow is empty. And when the brow is empty and low, it's the worst condition. So two things is what I'm trying to integrate is the concept of how to use Botox before fat transfer and after fat transfer, and how I time this. Before fat transfer, I prefer not to do too much forehead work for two reasons. One is the fact that I want to sort of give you that little bit of a lift until I can fill it in. When I fill it in, it literally doesn't matter where your brow position is. It should be about right. So I'm very conservative on the forehead when I work with people before fat transfer. And the other thing that's important is looking at people that are what I call active brow lifters. Those are people that walk through the door and they're looking like this the whole time. The reason they're lifting their brows is because their brows are deflated and it looks better higher, so they're constantly lifting their brows, and that's a habit I like to break. But I gently break that habit, and I specifically need to be very careful before a fat transfer to break that habit, because if I convert them from a high empty to a low empty, then it looks really bad and they're very upset at me and they don't know why. So usually before a fat transfer, before I can inflate it into a position where I don't care if it's high or low, I will only slowly touch their forehead and build it to the point where they can tolerate it. And sometimes I never give a full dose because they just can't tolerate their brows being slightly low until I fill it in. And then the position does not matter, because full, high or low doesn't matter. It's when it's empty that it does matter if it's high or low, because if it's low, it looks ugly. If it's slightly high, it's better, but it's nothing like until it's filled in. And so I want to have you understand why I believe that a chemical brow lift with a little Botox is a great compromise until I can do the brow. And a lot of times when I do the brow, and I do it with vigor, is a day before fat transfer, because there's two reasons. A brow lifter, someone that lifts their own brows all the time, cannot tolerate a full dose in the forehead. They feel too stiff. It's just like taking their habit and sweeping it from them. And so a day before fat transfer, when they're recovering from the fat graft and the brows are now inflated, they oftentimes don't have the shock level of, because they're focused on the recovery, and they don't get the shock level of their brows being very stiff. So that may be a very complicated subject, and if you at least heard it one time, I'd be more than happy to tailor that to you and discuss it with you. I think the take-home message with this is understanding how judiciously I use Botox before and after a fat transfer, why the brow position in terms of height is not as relevant when it's full. And the best way to challenge you to understand this is go back and look at your old photos. I think you'll get it. And if you don't, bring them in. Let's sit down and discuss that. And hopefully that idea of Botox relationship with brows before and after fat transfers, the concept of balloons and bags was not too confusing, but relatively understandable. Thank you.